Hello everyone, I'm Heather Dantwine from the Next Gen Hub of Oka. Welcome to Oka podcast series, Nurturing Knowledge, Indigenous Health Research Stories and Podcasts. I'm a Bardi woman from Derby in the West Kimberley, and I am on the lands of the Nyingina people in Derby, Western Australia. I'd like to start the podcast by acknowledging country and the various countries from where our listeners are located, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge the ongoing contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to society at local, national and international levels. Our guest today is Associate Professor Veronica Matthews, who is from the Quandamooka community and working at the University Centre for Rural Health at the University of Sydney. So, Veronica, would you introduce yourself in whatever way you feel comfortable?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Heather. My mob is Quandamooka from Mandjerribah, which is Stradbroke Island, just off the coast there of Brisbane. I actually grew up off-country, though, in Gearable, Djerriwarrh and Yagara country up in the range in Toowoomba. The reason why I came to be there was that my grandparents moved away from Mandjerribah when my mum was young. But every summer holidays, though, we would travel back to Straddy, spend our summer holidays with family over there, and that was always the yearly highlight for us kids. But I too would like to acknowledge country from where my ancestors are, there in Quandamooka, but also where I'm now living and working, and that's the Bachelor Nation. I'm living in Lismore, Widjabul country in the northern rivers of New South Wales, which is beautiful saltwater country, just like Mandjerribah. Yeah, as you mentioned in the intro, I work at the University Centre for Rural Health. With a great team, our research is focused on environmental health and primary healthcare systems, and particularly that crucial link between healthy country and what it means to make us healthy.
Veronica, what inspired you to pursue a career in health research?
Well, it was a bit of a roundabout journey, actually. I certainly had no dream of, or no early dream anyway, of working as an academic. It sort of just evolved, more so probably finding out what I didn't want to do. But from an early age, I definitely had an interest in nature and loved being outdoors. So I did ecology and botany as part of my undergraduate at uni. When I left uni, I found myself as a graduate in the public service, where I bounced around for a while, ended up in OATSI, the Office of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health, as it was known at the time. Spent nearly 10 years there, and I think throughout that phase I realised I wasn't really fit for government service. I felt a little bit soulless, I guess. It was hard work, being within a system that didn't really work for mob, for community. Don't get me wrong, though, because I was certainly amazed at the great work that Aboriginal community control health organisations do, the services, what they did or how they can get around sort of the rigid confines of bureaucratic silos and all those burdensome reporting requirements. I felt I could probably contribute better and perhaps, bring about change, advocating from the outside rather than inside. And my brother Chris was in research. He was a academic. He's a mathematician working in education, and he was changing up systems of maths education at school for Murray kids. So he was a bit of an inspiration for me. And at the time when I was feeling a bit lost, he introduced me to some researchers working in environmental toxicology, which related to my early degrees. And I got involved in a project that was centred on Stradbroke Island and Moreton Bay, looking at pollutants in seafood species from the bay and doing a health risk assessment for mob over there.
Veronica, what cultural values or teachings from your community have guided you towards a career in health research?
Definitely the foundational principle for me, even in those early PhD days, is knowing to put community first, putting mob first, and being inclusive and making sure you communicate in an accessible way. So working closely with community to understand what their needs are and doing your very best to support communities to reach their aspirations and goals. Most importantly, listen to and prioritise First Nations knowledges It's something I have grown to appreciate, I guess, living off country. But, as I have this privileged position of being able to work with mob from all across country, understanding that our knowledges do come from our land. We have learnt to live sustainably from those knowledges as well in a reciprocal way for thousands of generations. It's my belief that our knowledges are really the key to everyone's future on this planet. That's the primary thing for me is prioritizing our knowledges and our community's needs.
Veronica, can you share any personal or professional goals you have set for yourself as a health researcher?
Oh, nothing too big, Heather. I just really want to break the whole Western colonial system, as I think most academics do. But seriously, though, the elders that I work with talk about the need to shake the bush, and to turn everything upside down. At the moment, we are on this road to self-destruction with the dominant culture, that egocentric nature of the way most people think, capitalist mindsets that have this endless drive for personal wealth with absolutely no consideration of the consequences for anything else. It sounds huge. You got to have this pathway forward to a better way. Otherwise, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed and depressed listening into the news cycle every day. You could be carrying in a corner and not wanting to face the problems that we have at hand. Again, just working with mob, I'm of the belief that we need to return to original Indigenous worldviews towards fairer, compassionate, ecocentric mindsets where power is equally distributed and people care for their community and their environment. People care for each other and their environment. Our goals are to work with communities in place-based ways, because as I mentioned, that's where the knowledge is. They know what works best. I have the privilege of joining a growing scholarship of Indigenous nation building, which is all about prepping and supporting communities to be sovereign. It's a synergy project that we were recently successful in, called Staunch, Stronger Together as Unified Nations for Community-Led Health. And Staunch actually sounds like what the project is. We recognise that at the same time we are rebuilding nations and redistributing the power. We also need to train up our non-Indigenous allies, because we need this growing band of supporters to teach and demonstrate that there are much better alternatives to our current systems. So despite the enormity of the challenge, I reckon we can do it step by step together, one nation at a time.
Congratulations on your Synergy grant. And what you've just talked about is, I think, a good segue into the next question. In how do you see your research contributing to closing the health gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations?
I think Staunch really goes to the heart of the Closing the Gap reforms, which were jointly developed by our peak bodies and the government around power sharing and partnerships, which requires this bottom-up place-based approaches, given that our communities are so diverse in culture and in the variety of circumstances and challenges that they face. So I think Staunch directly speaks to those reforms. And we do have other current projects as well, like Healing Country, where we're working with mob in different settings in metro, rural and remote areas to think about changes to country that have come about through climate change, and with community, develop community-led climate adaptation plans. So in doing that, we're documenting their stories of changes to country, but also providing communities with climate, health, and environmental data that relates to those stories, so they get a full picture of what is happening to country. And we're going to be pulling those narratives and the data together digitally online to create these story data maps, which will belong to community. These will be sort of live stories that community can add to over time as well. So we're working with Wajak Noongar mob in Perth, Bunjalung in Northern Rivers, here where I am, and Warramungu mob in Tennant Creek. So all very different in terms of climate and socio-geographic situations. In Tennant, the heat and housing are particularly problematic. They're current issues at the moment. With Warramungu community, they're already leading their own adaptation strategy around housing, so taking control of the community housing design and construction to produce some prototype homes to demonstrate to government that things can be done differently, but with much better outcomes. If you just talk to mob and include them in the process, being tired of the same old delivery of housing, which are those cement block homes that look like prison cells from the inside. They're not meeting the cultural needs of Warramungu mob, and now they're not meeting the climate needs too, as the environment gets hotter. So the project and community organisation is called Wili Junta, which means standing strong together. These homes that they're designing will fit their cultural needs. Yeah, we're hoping for the first build early next year, and we can showcase to government then these homes can be beautiful and livable within the same sort of budget that they're spending at the moment. So yeah, it's these types of participatory and place-based approaches that puts decision-making power in the hands of community, and that's the only way that we're going to close the gap.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's look forward to seeing some of your achievements, as you and your team's achievement as you go along. And you've talked a bit about this, but would you like to expand on the unique challenges and opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health researchers in addressing the health disparities faced by Indigenous communities?
A unique and probably one of the main challenges for us is the academic system itself, particularly, the constant pushback you get when you're trying to promote our own ways of knowing, being and doing, that perceived lack of validity of our approaches. A lot of academics, senior academics, consider our methodologies as inferior because, we haven't been writing them down, our knowledges and our science. But academia is slowly changing, though. I mean, we're seeing more of our methodologies pushed to the fore, and that is because of the Black academic leadership that has gone before us. But I still hear this view, from certain people, and I also hear of others challenged in similar ways. And it's a bit of a mind boggle for me to understand why people can be so close-minded to our ways of knowing, being and doing that really has resulted in the longest surviving culture on the planet. So we know a thing or two about sustainably living within our environment. But it's not about dissing Western science either. There's a place for that knowledge too, and it's blending both knowledge systems where we'll get the best outcomes, like as I just described in the Healing Country project. It's important for our mob to have that data, that the Western science to help with their decision-making processes as well as their own knowledges, particularly in the context of climate change. The important part, though, of, progressing our knowledges in academia is the protection piece too. So we need to make sure that we do research in safe ways that protects our data and cultural IP. We need the data systems that can do that. And I know that there is much work going on currently that will support that protection.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, Veronica. It is quite a challenge, but there's some things that are slowly changing. What aspects of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health research do you find most compelling, and why? And you've sort of talked about that throughout what you've said about your research, but do you want to add to that?
Just to re-emphasise, that working with communities is such a rewarding experience, and the amount that I've learnt from different mobs, but also the relationships that you form. These aren't temporary sort of finite interactions that are contained within 3 to 5 year project timeframes. These are relationships that are going to exist for a long time. Adding to that, the beautiful places we visit, the beautiful country and cultural landscapes, and just witnessing the deep knowledge and those spiritual connections that mob have with country. Just getting an understanding of different mobs, their dreaming, songlines. It's all very similar approaches, across the whole country. That pattern thinking over millennia shows that everything in this world is connected through a series of relationships, and I think it's that relationality that is so beautiful. And that's the problem, I think, with the dominant culture, is that we hold ourselves above everything else and particularly treat our environment as something separate from us. That's where we get into trouble.
I agree. So, Veronica, what would you say to a 17-year-old Veronica Matthews about choosing a career direction?
The 16, 17-year-old me wasn't really so sure of herself at that time, growing up in the 80s, let alone what really I aspired to be. Growing up in Toowoomba at that time was a pretty monocultural town. Grew up in the Catholic school system. So trying to find my identity within a town and a school community that sort of didn't represent me. I think I grew up with a lot of shame, fear of rejection, being queer, pale-skinned black kid trying to find her feet and place in the world. So I would probably say to her, as I was a pretty angst-ridden kid, don't worry, be proud, be staunch, and be patient in finding your way. I do believe in ancestral guidance. I think I'm meant to be where I am now, even though it took a bit of a long time and a bit of a circular path to get here.
That's very insightful, Veronica. What do you believe are the most critical health issues facing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities?
The most critical issue, I think, in terms of our health disparity is that it ultimately comes down to a lack of power. Ever since colonisation took our autonomy, we continue to lack power over policy and systems that are otherwise stacked against us. And I really like this sentence in the Uluru Statement that says, when we have power over our own destiny, our children will flourish. And I think the Staunch project is our response to the failed voice referendum. We can't wait for governments any longer. We just need to take control over our own destinies, take back power. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Staunch is about rebuilding Indigenous nationhood. That scholarship has come from Native American nations who have broken through their colonial constraints to return to strong prosperity and well-being. And some nations here in Australia, Black leadership here, have adapted those processes to our own local context and have already begun developing their own political constitutions, getting organised by building up and strengthening their own governing institutions, and designing and implementing their strategic plans that take that holistic approach to health. So they might cover a range of activities to support community, like language revitalisation, economic development, caring for country. So it's going to be a tough few years ahead. Getting Staunch off the ground is not a straightforward project. It's going to take time to really heal our communities after 200 plus years of colonisation. But yeah, I think we can do it just one nation at a time.
Well, thank you, Veronica.
All right, take care.
Thank you for your support of Nurturing Knowledge, Indigenous Health Research Stories in Podcasts. This podcast is part of OCA's collective vision to develop the next generation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander researchers. We hope you found inspiration in this episode. If you have any questions or would like to share your thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at www.ocanetwork.org or via email at oca@uq.edu.au. Stay tuned for more enriching stories to come.